I didn't even see you sneak in there.
I snuck in. Here I am.
Everybody, I'm going to put it on speaker view. Welcome, Dana Cavalea, and welcome everybody to another Talent Champions Council Masterclass. This one, we got a little reverb there. I don't know what's going on. This one is on performance development, and probably nobody better to talk about that than somebody like Dana, who for 12 years was the director of performance for the New York Yankees, led them to a World Series in 2009. He won the Nolan Ryan Award as the best performance coach, and that was voted on by his peers. He's done it all. I mean, he's coached literally some of the icons of the game, the Derek Jeters, the A-Rods, the Mariano Riveras, the Clemens, you name it. Worked under two amazing managers in Joe Torre and Joe Girardi, now running his own firm. He's a great keynote speaker. And if you have not picked up your copy of Habits of a Champion, there's very few books that I've read multiple times, in full transparency. I have read this book 3 times. It's absolutely just packed with powerful wisdom that he gleaned over a career teaching people about how to perform at their highest level. So Dana, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So the format, for those that don't know, is we're going to spend a little bit of time, Dana and I, chatting. I've got a couple questions for Dana. Then we're going to open it up for you guys to ask questions directly to Coach. So what you'll do is just say in the chat that you've got a question, and then we'll call on you and you can ask your question directly to Dana. So these are a lot of fun. Quick update, our next speaker is going to be Heather Monahan. That's May 11th. She's going to be talking about confidence. If you're not following Heather Monahan, I definitely would highly recommend it. She's amazing. And another quick note, we have our 23rd country represented as of today. We added a member in Montenegro, which I had no idea where Montenegro even was, but now I know it's between Serbia, Croatia, and Albania. So we are now 23 countries strong, which is pretty incredible. So anyway, Dana, we're excited to have you. And why don't you just give us a little bit of backstory, how you went from a student at the University of South Florida, a guy looking through a chain link fence. The next thing you know, you're with the Yankees and you're coaching iconic players and a World Series champ.
Yeah. Well, it was a very interesting journey, one that was filled with a lot of self-induced pressure, I like to say. And in many instances, it still is. But at the end of the day, I decided I was a New York kid, born and raised, went to the University of South Florida down in Tampa. I knew that, the Yankees had spring training there, the Pirates, the Blue Jays, the Phillies, all these different teams. So where I grew up on Long Island, we didn't have any sports teams, right? We had the Islanders in hockey. I wasn't a hockey guy. But for the most part, there was never that big density where you would see professional athletes walking around town and this, that, and the other thing. So, I decided to go to Florida because I knew that's where the talent was. That's where the athletes were. And really, I got into coaching. I'll start off where I got into coaching. I was an underperforming player. That's how I got into coaching. I aspired to play for the New York Yankees. I wanted to be a player in the MLB. And I played a year in college. And I realized, wait a minute, my talent set is not what it needs to be by my own assessment and evaluation and by the assessment and evaluation of professional baseball scouts. So that's when I decided to leave New York, go to the University of South Florida, and start interning with the football team. So right away, I always had a passion and a love for performance and performance enhancement, as well as coaching, because I realized the power of coaching and how it could transform an individual, as well as transform a skill set and take that sponge and literally wring it out. So here it was in February, a February day. Yankees are down for spring training. And I love telling this story over and over again. Many of you may have heard it already, but I parked about 1.5 miles away from the spring training facility in Tampa. Couldn't afford parking at the time. I was working at Busch Gardens, making $7 an hour. And I had this dream of going to see the Yanks. So I head up to the spring training facility with my old flip phone, camera phone, and I'm taking pictures of players like Derek Jeter, Andy Pettit, all these great players through a chain link fence. And I'm sending them back home to my friends in New York and my family in New York, where it was probably 30 degrees and freezing. And here we are in the land of the palm trees. And really, it was amazing just watching these players perform. So that day I go back to my internship at the University of South Florida, and the head strength coach there, Ron McKeefer, says, "Hey, Dana, could I talk to you?" Pulls me in his office. I think I'm about to get let go. And he says, "Listen, I got a call from the head coach with the Yankees, and he needs a guy to hand out towels, hand out waters, and basically watch the weight room while he's on the field. Would you have any interest in that?" And I said, "You know what? I would definitely have interest in that. When do I start?" And he says, "You start tomorrow." So I said, next day, I blew off class, drove up to the stadium, parked right up front because I had a parking spot reserved for me. And they said, "Hey, are you Dana Cavalea?" I said, "Yeah." And they threw a credential around my neck, C for clubhouse, F for field access, threw me in Yankees gear. And next thing you know, that same field I was taking pictures of a day earlier, I'm now standing in the middle of. And the greatest lesson that I learned right there was it's all about positioning, number one, but number two, you can go from one side of the fence to the other that quickly. So it was an amazing journey. And at the time I was 19 years old. And at 22, I got hired as the head strength and conditioning coach, director of performance for the New York Yankees. And, I was young and definitely not prepared in terms of my overall knowledge set, but I was very open to learning. And that's how I got by. And like our buddy Scott McGregor here, for me, I realized that I didn't have maybe all the knowledge at the time to get, to understand training and performance enhancement. I wasn't there yet. I was only 22 years old, but I understood people. And if there's one thing I'm grateful for about growing up in the Northeast is you learn about people very quickly, especially in New York. You learn about the hustle, you learn about being hustled, and you learn how to communicate well. And that's what I did. And I looked at my experience getting started. I was basically a bartender in the strength and conditioning facility, make guys feel good, get them to trust me, and be open enough to try something new. And that's really how I got started. And I actually apply many of those same principles today.
I love it. So what you do now is you coach leaders, often CEOs, entrepreneurs, and you're applying a lot of those same principles. I'm curious, what do you see as the differences and the similarities in coaching professional athletes and then in coaching leaders in corporate America?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of the things that I see, in sports, you could just tell a guy how it is, right? You can go up to him, blast him, and it's good. And you move on and that's it. But, there's a definite softening that's there in corporate today, where you have to watch everything you say, how you say it. And then there's a complaint about poor communication. But if you can't communicate openly, you can never have great communication. So that's one thing that I see. The other thing I see is that there is a lack of preparedness from both the executive level and everybody below for what this new environment entails. And by new environment, I don't mean post-COVID. I mean that if you're in business today, business is the most competitive sport in the world. You got the most brilliant minds playing it. You have people that are hungry playing it. But the thing is, you have to understand all that's involved to play and perform and compete at the highest level. And many of the leaders that I work with, they come to me after 20, 30 years of grinding, and they say, hey, I'm fatigued, I'm burnt out, I'm not sleeping well, I'm stressed, and it's getting the best of me. I'm 25, 30 pounds overweight. And they're realizing now, 25 plus years, some of them into their journey, that they can't compete anymore at the level that they need to compete in order to play the most competitive sport in the world, which is the sport of business. So I say there's a communication issue that I see. There's a lack of preparedness to play the game at the highest level. And what I find too is the rawness of sport is something that's amazing, where like, if you don't perform, you're out. I can't tell you how many leaders I work with that they just keep giving people chance over chance over chance, and they get let down and let down and let down, and they don't make the change. And that's something that I find that's tension that you're holding on to because you're not taking an action. Where sports, we play for money, right? Number one, we play for money. Number two, there's always somebody that could replace the talent that's not performing. And at the end of the day, you become actually, you're friendly with your people, you engage them, but you're not emotionally attached to where you can't make a move. So I find, today there's so many different folks that are talking about leadership, and, many of them are authors. I always say I happen to write a book, but I'm a coach who happens to have written a book, and I'm a coach that happens to speak. I'm not a speaker that happens to coach, and I'm not an author that happens to speak and coach. So it's, for me, I approach things very different, but we're also in a time where it's all about like, for me, it's a lot of like hugging culture, and you got to love everybody on your team. And I got to tell you, on many of the teams that I was on where we won, we didn't love each other, but we respected each other. Okay. We challenged each other. There were fights that broke out. And in the end, what we did love together was winning. We loved to win. We loved championships. We loved victory, and we loved everything that came with that. Okay. So for me, that's how I coach now. It's business, and we got to be ready to play and ready to compete and do whatever it takes to win. That doesn't mean we disrespect people, but we can't be afraid to challenge people either.
Agree with you 1,000%. So, you've worked with Hall of Famers and bench players, and you're coaching that full spectrum. What I think probably everybody's curious, what makes Jeter and Mo and those guys and A-Rod, what makes them iconic and Hall of Famers? Like, what's the differentiator between the bench player and the Hall of Famer?
Yeah.
Is it physical skills, or are there other attributes that play a bigger role?
Well, there's definitely physical skills. And this is something that took me actually a little while to figure out. I said, there's definitely, in sports, we know there's talent, and there's different levels of talent. But the same is actually true in business, right? There's different levels of talent. There's some people that have an innate ability to lead. There's some people that have an innate ability to sell. There's some people that have an innate ability to market. That's real. And that's called talent. And we could never deny that. But when you look at professional sports, the difference between a Jeter and, say, a bench player is, number one, talent, but also talent sustainability. That bench player could go out and do well for a day, a week, 3 weeks, or a month, but Derek Jeter could do well for 20 years. So that's a big difference, right? Talent, sustainability. That's a big thing. The other thing is, it's self-belief. When you're around a player like Derek Jeter, he believes in himself. He believes in his talent. And he's also a bit stubborn. You're not going to change how he thinks too much. He's not closed-minded, but he has a stubbornness in saying, you know what? I know who I am. I know how I work best. I'm open, but I'm not going to overhaul everything anytime something new comes out, or if there's some new protocol, new training, or whatever. And that's another thing when I see in business, there's a lot of reactivity to, pardon my language, but to covering your own ass in business. Where in sports, again, it's very raw. And that's the whole idea. Players know what they need. And one thing I learned early in my career and watching against some of these elite players like Jeter, like even A-Rod and like Mariano, is they have a system that yields a result for them. And they execute on their system day in and day out without getting bored. And I can't tell you how many people I coach, they get bored. They get bored with process. They get bored with the monotonous nature of doing things, which leads to success. And one thing, again, another thing that I learned was success is boring. It's the same thing day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out. And when I coach people, I have a whiteboard and I draw a circle and I say, this is your bullseye. In that bullseye's 3 to 5 activities. These are your big 3 to big 5 that you hit on every single day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in. And that is what yields what you're looking for. But oftentimes we work outside of our bullseye and that gets us in trouble. But when you look at the best in the world, they stay focused on that bullseye. And, you know, I want to bring this up, Scott, because I think it's important. You know, we're definitely in a social media driven culture in many ways. Yep. And, you know, what you see on there is a lot of the sexy stuff, the cool stuff, the fun stuff. But, you know, for your brand, for this council, like nobody knows what's happening behind the scenes because that's really not the sexy, shiny stuff.
Right.
But there's a lot of mundane, consistent activity that has to take place for a result to yield itself. And you show me somebody that's made it in anything, there is somebody that's consistent in the right things.
Yeah, that discipline is, you know, such a hallmark of winners. It's doing the boring stuff. I don't know why it popped into my head, but I remember the story about Wade Boggs. Didn't Wade Boggs eat chicken like every single day? You'd think like, oh my God, this guy's going to get sick of chicken at some point. But winners pound that rock. They just pound it and pound it and pound it until it cracks.
You know what it is? It's an endurance event. It's an endurance game. And like a player like Derek Jeter, right? White bread, peanut butter and jelly before every game. Nothing else. Never deviated. That was it. And every player has a routine like that. Every player that has played for 10, 15 plus years, that's what you see. Mariano Rivera, I wrote about in my book, you know, 6th inning, I used to have a green tea with honey and a Nature's Valley green oat and honey granola bar ready to go. If that wasn't there at the same time, he'd blow a shit fit. But it was that sort of, you know, monotony that again, you find comfort in that. And sometimes you have to tweak things because comfort can be bad. But for the most part, you should only be tweaking maybe 5 to 10% of your routine. Outside of that, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Interesting. So we're all, you know, performance development is something that I think we're all personally working on, but many of us are leaders where we're trying to lead other people to perform at a higher level. Tell me how you think about goal setting and, you know, goal setting for the high achievers, goal setting for the people who have kind of a long way to go. Is it different or is goal setting the same for you?
Yeah, it's the same. So I actually just finished writing a book called Habits of a Champion Team. And it's built on this premise, right? Individuals make up teams. So once we understand that, we realize that every person on our team is an individual. They have individual likes, preferences, paces in which they work, ways of doing things. Every person is unique. We have, you know, how many people here? We have 54 people on the line here. If I were to coach this group, that's 54 people I need to get with and understand what makes them tick. But when it comes from a goal standpoint, no matter where you are on this spectrum of 54, whether you run $1 billion company, a $10 billion company, a $300 million company, or a $30,000 company, what I say is you have to become obsessed with what I call is your gap. And we all have it. And I call it the performance gap. And it's simply this. Here's where I am. Here's where I want to be. Here's who I am. And here's who I want to be. And in between that space is where goal setting originates, right? Here's where I am. Here's where I want to be. Okay, well, tell me where you are and tell me where you want to be. And I need you to articulate that with specificity. And Many people struggle to do that. So that's why I find when it comes to goals, anybody could write a number like, yeah, I want to make $100,000 this month, or I want to make X, because most goals are typically around income and waistline. That's what I find, right? So, but
So
again, it's
true.
very easy for people to it's very difficult actually for people to articulate in specificity what it is that they want. And then it's great that when you get them to that point, but now you need an actual plan and strategy to get there that's custom made and retrofit for you. And again, I know sometimes I come across with a little bit of a chip, but that's my biggest issue with so many of the books that are out there. They don't address you as an individual. And I start coaching people and say, hey, they tell me, I got to be up I read in a book, I got to be up at 4 a.m. or I'm going to be a loser. And I'm like, wait, are you a morning person or are you a night person? When do you do your best work? And if you're a night person and you're waking up at 4 a.m., that's a bad strategy. And if you're a morning person that's staying up and trying to do, what you got to do late at night, that's a bad strategy. So we have to retrofit strategy for each individual based on who they are, where they want to go, who they are, and who they want to become. And when we can do that, we can create an individualized plan for each person. And I'm telling you, this is the biggest gap for people. I'm working with a sales team up in Canada right now. And the leader of the team, it's amazing. They just sold the company for 300 plus million. And she brought me in to work with each individual member of their sales team to address them as individuals because that wasn't her strength. And I said, wow, that's really cool because this is somebody that understands individuals make up teams. And she also understands that it is people over everything. If her people aren't functioning, there's no way they're going to get the outcome and goal that they desire as an organization.
What's interesting. So years and years ago, I was kind of sick of quotas because I thought that quotas were just kind of this corporate mandate that, 30 people all have to hit $1 million and that's going to be a meaningful goal for everybody. And I just thought that's so unrealistic. Like that might be really meaningful for one person and completely meaningless for another.
Right.
Why do we do that? And there's so many inherent problems with kind of just that blanket goal. So I got rid of quotas and I started personalizing quotas for each person so they would set their own goal. The interesting thing to your point earlier is oftentimes the first thing that people told me was their goal wasn't really their goal.
Yeah.
It was, I want to make $300,000 a year. I'd say, great. If you make 275, are you going to be happy? They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, okay, that's probably not really a goal. So it was really a process of discovery of really asking them lots of questions to really figure out what was important to them. And then I found it was unbelievably effective to manage each person individually towards their individual goals because it was actually meaningful to them. Mm. So I'm imagining you do the same, whether it's for the Yankees or whether it's for your corporate clients.
Yeah, it's the same thing because I look at whoever I work with as a team, right? So whether it's a sports team or whether it's a business team, it's the same. It's a team, right? It's a group of individuals that want to do better, provided you have the right people. And that's exactly it, right? Somebody may be looking for, a house on the water that's worth $5 million, and somebody else may be saying, hey, you know what? I'm the first person in my family to buy a home. I just want to buy a home. Right. Yep. And that's okay. We can oftentimes too get in trouble when people's desires don't match ours, and that can get us in trouble. Right. And we start to judge and evaluate somebody, and it's like, hey, they don't want the same thing as you. And that's okay. If everybody was a leader, we'd also get in trouble. Right. This is something that I wrote in my book. It's like, if everyone was a leader, there'd be a lot of conflict. You need followers, right? You need people that are motivated and inspired by a few people. If everybody was leading, there'd be a lot of tug of war and it would be a very dysfunctional workplace.
So we are going to jump into Q&A. Again, if you have a question for Coach, just put something in the chat. You don't have to put the question in the chat. Just say, basically raise your hand and say, I've got a question. But before we do that, we're going to do a special giveaway. So we're going to give away a signed copy of Dana's book for the first person who answers this question. So Dana is married to a wonderful woman, Lauren, and her father won a very prominent award. What award did Dana's father-in-law win? Nobel Peace
No,
Prize.
that's great.
Mike, thank you for playing, but you are out. Cy Young, Oscar. All right. Whoever got it, yes. So Dana's father-in-law, very appropriate because we just had it, is an Academy Award winner. So very, very cool. And
Face
Halloween,
of the Joker.
Halloween is always fun at the Cavalea house, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. Our first question, I think we're going to Vermont to Catherine. Catherine, you are up.
Okay. I could talk about sports forever. I helped to launch the WNBA, and I also ran a coaches association. But my question for you is, my heart still aches thinking about the 2001 World Series and the final 7th game. And how do you work with a high performer like Mario Rivero after such a situation as what happened in 2001? It was like the 9/11, all the emotions were raw. He's usually a closer. And so in such a high profile situation, like how do you help someone come back from that? Obviously he's professional, but.
Yeah, great. No, that's a great question. So it was probably like, 24 months ago now that we were sitting I had to rebuild the gym in his house, and we were just sitting waiting for these, the truck to come and drop everything off. We were sitting in his living room, and I said, hey, I got to ask you a question. And this is why I'm laughing that you brought this up. I said, back in 2001, when you gave up the game in Arizona, what would you do differently? And he said, buddy, let me tell you something. I would do nothing different. He said, I would throw the same pitch in the same spot and I would do nothing different. He said, the only thing that frustrated me and that I regret about that game is that it was the last game of the season and I had to wait all the way to April to redeem myself again. So, for a guy like that, the lesson is this: like, there's so much trust and belief in himself, and he believed in that pitch, and even though that pitch was hit, he still believed in what it is that he did. So I think that's the greatest lesson. And if I were to coach somebody, I would take that same story and apply it and say, hey, do you believe you did your best? And if you say yes, sometimes you get beat, like in sports, and that. Sometimes you get beat in business. Sometimes you lose a deal, but that doesn't mean you're a bad deal maker. That doesn't mean you're a bad athlete. That doesn't mean you're a bad leader. Just sometimes you lose. And this is an example I use with hitters. Hitters, many of them get up to bat and they actually believe that they're going to get a hit every time up. And that sounds like that's great. I want people on my team that want to get a hit every time they get up, but it gets dangerous because when they don't, they can get really down on themselves. So what we do is we train people to be competitive rather than perfect, because perfection doesn't exist in business. It doesn't exist in sport. It never exists. But if you are competitive and I were to say, hey, did you give it your best, Catherine? Did you give it everything you had? Were you prepared? Were you ready? And you said yes, then we do the same damn thing again.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was a fabulous answer, and I'm glad it had
that is
a timely.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. We're going to go to Maryland to Matt McDarby.
Dana, great to have you with us.
Hey, Matt.
You were talking about addressing everybody has gaps, right?
Yep.
In your experience, is it better to try to play to someone's strengths to close a gap, or should we be focused on fixing their weakness or solving a weakness?
Another great question. I just was teaching on this yesterday. There's a lot of talk out there, right, that you hear where it's like, hey, just focus on your strengths and double down on them. But a question I always ask is, hey, if you were to do that, what do you think about your weaknesses? They're still there, right? So what I find is the way the mind works best and what brings us ease and brings us more confidence and conviction is when we work on things that we're not great at, knowing they're never going to be as good as our strengths. But if we just leave them untouched and say, hey, forget them, it doesn't matter. We, as high achievers, high performers, high expectation individuals, will still be thinking about those things. And I'll give you an example, again, using a Derek Jeter, for example, late in his career, he was still performing well. He was still, anything that was hit to him, he'd catch and throw and be fine. As a hitter, he was fine, but his range left and right was starting to shrink a little bit. And the media was crushing him for it. So what did we do? We didn't just say, Derek, don't worry about it. Just focus on the balls that are hit to you. Make a good throw. Focus on your hitting. You're fine. We said, no, let's break down your first step. And what we found was instead of going straight to the ball, he would take a slight roundabout step. So it actually got us to look at him more objectively and clean him up. And he felt so much better as an individual that he was working on it. And then he started to tell the media, hey, if this is real, what you're seeing, and I'm working on it. And everything quieted down. So I've always been a big believer, especially with high expectation, high performance, high achieving individuals. If you leave those weaknesses untouched, you will have this constant pull to them. So why not just put as a part of your day-to-day plan or week-to-week plan, a time for you to work on those weaknesses? Because if you close the gap on that weakness and you continue to elevate your strengths, collectively as a whole, you elevate. And that's what the obsession is. I bet you, here we are, 12:36, midday, midweek, and we got an excited group of people that are on here to say, hey, I want to get better today. So these are all high expectation, high achieving, high performance competitors that are on the line. So I think everybody could relate to this. If you were to leave a weakness untouched, how would you feel about that? And every high performer I know is like, no effing way, man. I'm going to get this thing closed and I'm going to get it better.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
Wonderful answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a great answer, and it's definitely a contrarian answer. So I think almost everything I hear, with the exception of David Goggins, who's always talking about working on your weaknesses, everybody is telling people to double down on their strengths.
Yeah,
so
I just
really good insight.
I think the contrarian spirit is, I love it because it allows you to go against what the norm is, and it allows you to do things that work for you and not feel guilty about it.
Yep.
And that goes for, by the way, that goes for every person here in every part of your game. Again, you don't have to, if you're spending too much time being an actor or an actress, that's exhausting. Or trying to do what everyone else is doing, that's exhausting. Do you, and I have a buddy of mine, he's a hitting coach, and he goes, and you know what, do you, and if people don't like it, they could either love it or they could shove it. And you're going to attract an amazing group of people. Again, look at this, Scott, 12:38 Eastern time right now. And we got a bunch of high performers together. We attracted high performance people, not average people.
Very true. So our next high performer is coming to us from Tampa. Jason, you're up.
Hey, Dana, Jason Eckhart, how are you?
Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Doing good. Been a little while. So one of the things I know, I've been fortunate enough to hear before, you talk about even keel and, the mentality and the ups and downs from an emotional toll and kind of middle ground and really, that energy draining activities, which I think is awesome advice. So it even relates right on to parlay off the Jeter piece, right? Where you're working with folks that have been in certain habits their entire life, right? And then you're technically altering them, right? So it's one thing on the physical side, but with the emotional component, right? It's wired a little different. Your whole life, you might've been triggered by certain events. You might've been just that emotionally raw person versus the person that's calm. I guess, could you help us, or elaborate on how you work with folks, particularly in the business world, but of course it relates to sports too, on that emotional side? How do you help them determine their triggers, walk through it, back to your kind of customization that you do, from a planning perspective?
Well, it's only an issue if it's an issue. Right?
True. Yeah.
So like, again, there's people out there that's who they are. They're emotional, but focused. But if you're emotional and all over the place and you're creating this, magnetic tornado where you're pulling someone in and throwing them out and that person leaves and they don't know what's going on, that's when it's a problem. Right? But at the end of the day, we have to always be in the habit of understanding, doing a scouting report on ourselves, right? And even taking some people that we trust around us to help us create that individualized scouting report. Hey, where am I strong? Where am I weak? And again, I would actually like a little more context with that question. Explain that a little bit more in terms of emotion.
Yeah. So, you have obviously individuals, right, that I have sales folks that work for me, people knowing over time. And again, some are, like you said, naturally even keel. Some are, emotionally get triggered pretty easily, where ups and downs. And like you said, they're causing those kind of energy draining. And as you said, It's not an issue if the performance is there, but it's how do you address that, I guess, with them, kind of like you said, where you specifically called out like Jeter, and you could look at the tail of the tape right there. How do you touch on that? Because again, they're already fairly sensitive, some folks, right?
Yep.
So how do you kind of address that with them, while being able to help them for future, triggers? That was kind of my question. Yeah.
Got it. So let's relate it to a sales team. And we'll say this, if we look at these individuals, the first thing I would do is sit with you, the leader, and I'd say, hey, are these the right individuals for your team? Right? Because sometimes, there's people, if you get super high on a sale and super low when you're in a slump, right there, it's an indicator of somebody not being a super high performance individual. Okay. Because, and it's also part two is they don't know the rules of the game in which they play. These are the equivalent of what you're mentioning is somebody that thinks they're going to bat 1,000. And when they don't get a hit, they go to the dugout and they start smashing things. And then they go out again and they're still pissed from that last at bat and they can't focus. That's again where it becomes the biggest problem in terms of emotion. But at the end of the day, what we have to do is get our people to understand what it is that we expect from them, but most importantly, what it is that they expect from themselves. And we have to understand where they're at. So when it goes back to that individuals make up teams, we got to figure out why are they responding that way. And a highly emotional person, it comes down to this. Oftentimes they don't trust themselves and they don't believe that they'll be okay in the future. So they hyper pressurize every situation, every moment, because every moment is ride or die, live life or death for them. Now, we could say that in some instances that could work to your advantage, right? That chip on your shoulder, everything matters. But the truth of the matter is when you don't understand it in scope, right, and understand it in totality, it could become very, very draining for an individual. So that's what really I would start doing is, unpacking it for them and start working with these people to ask, again, as you're asking that question, I'm imagining you're seeing faces pop into your head. And everybody on the line's like, yeah, I got somebody on my team like that. I know somebody like that. But it's important that we get with those people and we start to figure out what it is that they feel like either A, they're missing, or B, where they're lacking preparedness or subject matter knowledge or overall intelligence as it relates to what it is that they're doing. So it's actually an individual matter, but you got to know where these people are right now in their whole life. And that's how I address it. It's the same thing with a player. But some people too are fiery, but we got to make sure that fiery nature is applied in a forward direction and not something that's constantly pulling them back because they're an emotional wreck.
Right. I really appreciate that insight. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
We are going to Colorado. Scott Garber.
Dana, my man, what's going on? How you doing
what's
today?
Up, Scott? What's up? How we doing?
Man, I'm living large. I got elk in the front yard. I can't complain today.
Oh, nice.
Quick question for you, though. So I'm a former athlete, and more and more this idea of highly performing athletes in their game. How do you or what advice would you give as they're transitioning out of that game? Shout out to my man, Mark Moyer, who's on the call, who focuses on this. The space is evolving, and I know you straddle both sides at a really high level. So would love your insight there as I'm working with athletes that are coming out of baseball, hockey, et cetera, and trying to put that same skill set and mindset into the business world.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, right? I'm trying to put that same mindset and skill set into the business world. At what point did they lose it? Because they had to have it. Where did they lose it? That would be my question, right?
So let me drill down the layer deeper for you, Dana, because it's like you have this mentality of I performed at such a high level. And I think some athletes forget the process that it took to get there. And they expect that same level, or the market expects that same level of expertise as they transition over. And so I guess as you're pivoting in that skill set, how do you help them with their confidence or sort of build them back up when they're accustomed to being or performing at such a high level?
Got it. So, again, I went through this myself, but the reality is whenever you enter into a new arena, in that particular arena, you're a rookie. And every athlete could understand, hey, I'm a rookie. Every martial artist knows when they were a white belt, right? But they knew that there was a process to getting to that black belt or going from amateur to pro. That's truth. But what I was getting at too, even before you unpacked it a bit more, is they're actually more prepared going into this next opportunity than they were going into their previous opportunity because of the skills they acquired, or the skills that they enhanced and sharpened in their previous journey. So although they're a rookie in terms of time on the job and subject matter intelligence and market intelligence and things like that, they're still coming in with great skills, which allows them to have a faster learning curve because they are not, that's what, like talent, mindset, strong self-belief, that doesn't just leave you unless you never had it. So they have these skills. It's just important to realize that you're in a new environment, you're a rookie. And just like you had to spend more time, I'll relate it to baseball, right? Taking ground balls, taking more BP when you were younger. It's going to require the same thing of you now. When you get in this new arena, be ready to work as if you're a rookie. But what's going to happen is you're going to start off slow, and then you're going to start to see an acceleration based on your work. And, there's a saying that I have, and it's like knowledge leads to conviction. And the more knowledge you have, and that's knowledge in terms of acquired intelligence, but also knowledge as it relates to just being in that environment and doing it, you're going to get better and better if you have the mentality of I want to get better and better. So talent doesn't leave you, skills don't leave you, mindset doesn't leave you, but you have to have the right approach when you get into a new environment. And that approach is, hey, I'm a rookie. Like when I got into the business world of executive type coaching, speaking, writing, I said, I'm a rookie, but I'm going to work like hell to be the best at it.
Love that. Dana, thank you so much for taking time today, man. That was awesome.
Thanks, Scott.
We're going to the biggest Baltimore Orioles fan maybe on the planet, Eric Silverman. Nice mic.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you, Scott. Nice to meet you, Dana. So we got the battle of last place going on right now, man. Orioles and Yanks. We're not in last as of last night, so I'll take it. Hey, serious question. You were around when my all-time hero growing up, I always wanted to be number 35, Moose, Mike Mussina, 35 for the Orioles, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you know him a little bit.
I do.
But my question is, and I learned playing baseball, and I teach my kids this to this very day, Dana, and I try to implore this strategy. He was always the quietest dude. And my dad taught me to be quiet and be humble and just, I pitched, not like him, but just throw strikes, just paint the corners. Just so you give up a home run, who the hell cares? Just you got your next batter to focus on. I know he was with the Orioles first and you saw him after, but can you talk about that mindset and how you can maybe even teach, if it's even teachable, how you can coach and teach my employees and my team members and my athletes? I coach my daughter's softball team, my son's baseball team. How can I implore that upon my players and my team members to have that quiet persona and just put your head down and do your job?
Yeah. Well, in terms of persona, it's very difficult to have people recreate who they are, right? So that I just want to put that out there. But a couple things about your idol in Mike Mussina. Number one, what was his nickname? Do you remember that?
You broke up. I probably know it. Say it one more time, that last part. What was his
Mike
nickname?
Mussina, what was his nickname?
Moose.
Well, there he had another one too. I'll
Jeez.
tell it to you. He was known as the Professor.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. That's yeah.
So he got that nickname because, again, remember how I just said knowledge leads to conviction, marketing, intelligence, practice, all that. He was obsessive. He didn't say much, but he was obsessive with perfecting and mastery of his craft. That's what he did. He knew exactly what he needed to do, even with his training program. It was all aligned to perfection and mastery of craft on the field. And that's why he became what he is. Now, listen, he had talent, but his natural persona was actually knowledge acquisition and skill acquisition. And most importantly, knowledge acquisition to enhance skill acquisition. So it would be very difficult to recreate a Mike Mussina, but it would be actually quite easy to instill the principles which made a Mike Mussina into some of your people by them first understanding, hey, what do you struggle with? It's a great question for people. What are you struggling with? What are you not great at? What do you want to be better at? So he wanted to be a better pitcher. He actually wanted to be the best pitcher. He wanted to be a Hall of Fame pitcher. And then he worked backwards from that and said, where am I strong? Where am I weak? Okay, because I was with Moose in the back end of his career too, when his fastball went from 97 plus down to 88 mile an hour cotton balls that he was throwing up there. And he was still getting guys out. So what's really cool is because of his desire to be great, he desired to constantly evolve based on the evolution of his own physicality. And therefore, he had to adjust mentally as well. Could you imagine having your physical skills depreciate and you're being paid 10, 15, $20 million a year for those skills? Your skills are depreciating. And many people are like, oh my gosh, my skills are depreciating. What the hell do I do? And he actually recalibrated his mindset while his skill set was depreciating to still remain competitive. And he would say, okay, I can't throw 97 anymore, but what can I do? And that's where his ability to paint corners and study video and find the holes in everybody's swing, that's how he was able to get guys out. And he even redeveloped and created some different pitches for himself later in his career. So we could teach that desire for skill acquisition at any age, but we have to show our kids the importance of acquiring skill and how that skill acquisition can help them compete at a higher level than they are now.
I love it. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you.
All right. We've got time for a few more questions, but we're not going to be able to go into extra innings. So I know some people are probably not going to get their questions asked and answered. These answers are phenomenal. We're going to go to Teg in Madison, Connecticut, my hometown.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Dana, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks for asking. Great session here. I'm a Yankee fan too. Growing up in Connecticut there now. So I've been trying to formulate this question. I didn't come into this with a question crafted or knowing what I may ask you. But one of the things, being a Yankee fan, listening to talk radio, is going back to our New York Yankees and the struggles that they're having. And I watch them and I listen about it, and I kind of think of a scene in The Replacements where the coach says, "What are you afraid of?" Shane Falco says, "Quicksand." And I watch my Yankees, and I feel like that's what's going on. But obviously, someone like yourself that's been in that clubhouse, they probably wouldn't be where they are right now if you were still there. But in terms of looking at all the individual things, I'm just curious from a culture and a bigger picture standpoint. If you were invited back in there, you might be talking to people there now anyway, but if you were invited back in there, like, how would you start? What would you look at in terms of, because it's not a quick fix, something's going on. How do you start to attack it to get it back on track and recover?
Well, the biggest issue right now is you have a few things going on all at once, right? If you think about it, we'll use the Yankees as an example here, obviously, but when we look back at it, Joe Girardi, what was Joe Girardi known for? Discipline, right?
Yep.
Player discipline, doing things the right way, and pounding that into players. And he pissed off a lot of players because he would stay on them, but he didn't give up on them. Now, what they did was they brought in a manager that, again, upon hiring that manager, they said, well, the players could relate to him more. And that simply means that, again, you're going to forego some of the intensity of a Joe Girardi for a coach that, the players like more. But listen, I always find you don't always like your coach until you're done playing for him. Oftentimes it's like a great your boss, like, man, he was such a dick, but you know what? He made me better. But you don't see that oftentimes while that boss is putting his thumb on you. And, in Yankee universe right now, you have that. I believe you have a lack of on-field leadership. That's one. Number two, you have a one-dimensional team that's focused on hit a home run and win. If you don't hit home runs, you don't win. That's true. You have a starting pitching staff that outside of Garrett Cole is not dominant. You need 3 pitchers. You need 3 starting pitchers in MLB in order to win a championship. If you look back on championship teams, you need 2 dominant pitchers, but really 3 in order to win a World Series championship. Joe Torre would always say pitching and defense wins you championships. So when you start to see all these things going on, you start to answer questions. And then at the top, you're getting into, there's a bit of a confused strategy at the top. You had a dominant leader in George Steinbrenner for so many years. George Steinbrenner passed in 2010. The last championship was in 2009. So over the last 10 years, there's been a leadership decline across the organization. So you have a culture issue, you have a lack of on-field leadership, confusion at the top, and you have a one-dimensional team and you lack pitching. There's no way you could win like that. So again, I'm big on, just using the baseball analogy. Let's use a scouting report. Every leader, CEO, leader of an organization of any, whether it's sports or business, you have to do or have somebody do for you a scouting report on your team and even on yourself. In my new book, I said, there's a lot of leaders out there that have to fire themselves and then rehire themselves under new terms. But that's what I see a lot of that's going on. When we were winning, we had a way of doing things, and it was very different than just hit home runs. And if you couldn't hit home runs, then we didn't win. How many hit and runs do you see? Not many.
No.
How many, moving guys over strategically? You don't see any of that. That's what the game is.
Right. Yeah. No, I think they had a 7-pitch 9th inning last night to end the game.
I didn't even watch
7 pitches. No, you're right. That's a great answer. There's a lot going on in there, and thanks for being really concise and drilling into that with that answer. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ted. Thank you.
All right, we're going to try to get 2 more in quickly. We're going to go to Michelle in Jersey.
Jersey? No. I'm playing. Hi, Dana. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. My whole backstory. Number one, I wanted to remind everybody what today is. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Babe Ruth Day.
Today's Babe Ruth Day. That's number one. Number 2, New York strong, pinstripes forever. I could go on and on, but for the sake of time, my question is, as somebody who has spent 20 plus years in the corporate world and who's now doing what I've always wanted to do, which is coaching. My question is, there's such a disparity between coaching and leadership and management, which I talk about often with not only my clients, but just I have conversations all the time, because there's such a hyper focus on the results. It's always the results, but there are so many steps involved in between where you start and where hopefully you end up. And so with respect to coachability, accountability, and successful leadership, I just wanted your feedback on how you feel they're intertwined and how they work simultaneously when trying to bring the best out of your people and really hone in on not only what they're great at, but what they need more help with to be able to cultivate, those talents and get them to where they want to be.
It's an interesting question. I want to make sure that I understand it fully. So if you can just shrink it a little bit and give me like
Absolutely.
the quick shot.
So the feedback that I get often from people that I work with and just through discussions is that you can't just put demands on people or quotas, goals, and say, okay, this is where you have to be. This is where you have to strive towards. So there are different aspects of that whole equation that help people perform better. And a big chunk of that is accountability, whether they're accountable to themselves, accountable to a manager, a team member, but there's a big piece of accountability that really is powerful. And then coachability, if people are coachable. If they're not coachable, in my opinion, I don't care how good they are at whatever craft they do. If they're not coachable, it really is a game changer, no pun intended. So it's the accountability, the coachability, and then the sales or the business leadership that really gets behind all of that and really brings that out and practices what they preach.
Well, if we kind of go back a first step, right? Accountable to what, right? And coachable to who? Those are two really important questions because, I look at it like this. I'm not the greatest coach for every person, right? I'm aggressive. I'm going to come at you. I'm going to challenge you. That's not what everyone wants, right? So sometimes we have to be careful with coachability because not everybody will like our coaching style, right? So we perceive them to be not coachable, but really there's just a connection issue. So I just want to talk about that. But then you have accountability. And then the question that I have is accountable to what? Because again, we have to know what our people actually want. And when we understand that, then we can hold them accountable to first what they want. See, this is another thing that I see or issue that I see is like, we have these great mission statements in companies today, and we have these great rollouts and what we're going to do as a company. But we have to make sure that our people, number one, align to that. But first, and we could say whatever we want about this. People want to know that they're taken care of. Yeah. And then I'll give to the greater good, or I'm willing to give to the greater good as long as I'm taken care of too. And that's what I find people want. They want to make sure that they have that full connection. And that's why I say you have dual alignment that you have to hold people accountable to. First, you have to align them to their individual goals and successes. And then number two, you have to align them to the company. But you may have people that say, hey, I align to my stuff. I don't really align to your stuff. That person's got to go. And they need to go. And it's important for them to go because they're never going to get to where they really want to go in terms of their full potential. So you got to make sure when you're working with people, A, they have alignment to what they want, and B, they have alignment to what the company wants. And if they don't know what they want, that's where coaching comes in and you help them figure that out. But at any time, if somebody does not align to what the company is about, they just may be at the wrong company. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Scott McGregor could be a great leader. There may be people that just don't align with what something new stands for. It's not personal. Yeah, it's just what it is. So we got to look at companies and the people that make up our companies and teams from that standpoint and let them know that it's okay. Sometimes the best way to lead somebody is to lead them out of your organization and to an organization that they fit best with. And we can't be afraid, by the way, also, I want to put this out there. We can't be afraid of losing talent, because if that talent is not aligned to your organization and your mission and what you're looking to do, they're never going to work at their full talent set and capacity anyway. So they're working at 50% and they could become toxic pretty quickly. I hope that hit on accountability and coachability and the leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.
Phenomenal. Dana, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, I have time. I got a 3 o'clock today if you guys want to hang.
We are, we're going to Jeremy, taking us home. Last question.
All right, thanks, guys. So, hey, Dana, I got turned on to me from Corey Disson. And I got your book. Corey's a man. He's a madman. I read the book. Excellent book. Corey, I believe it is Rivera Rivera said, there's no big moments, right?
Yeah.
He slows the moment down. He gave you that advice. And that, I'll tell you, I took that moment, that advice, into a very big strategical negotiation. And I wasn't nervous. It was just good timing. So thanks for that advice. But I want to ask you though, specifically, you work with the highest caliber athletes. Now you're working with business folks. And I know you talked about Jeter having confidence, but there's a difference in confidence and self-esteem. Okay. And I know with athletes, they can be confident, but if they're in a slump, their self-esteem could vary, go up and down. When I'm working with new clients, small business owners, I have a problem I see with their self-esteem. Like their confidence is okay because they've succeeded in life. They got a new business and they're happy, but they have a problem with their believing in themselves. Just they have ups and downs, like you talked a little bit about earlier. But what would your experience tell you on dealing with the difference between high self-confidence and high or low self-esteem, especially when they're in conflict with each other?
See, I was gonna actually turn that back to you because I wanted to know how you define self-esteem.
So self-esteem is a perception of your worth. Okay. Self-confidence is the belief I can do something. Robin Williams had one. He goes up on stage, talk with a microphone, right, and talks to thousands of people. That's a lot of self-confidence. But he obviously had a self-esteem issue because he hung himself. Right. And you have mental issues that play into that, of course. But there is a difference between self-esteem and self-confidence, and so they're people.
So I want to jump in because I know where you're going with this. I believe that there is also an illusion of self-confidence that often exists in people, right? There's the illusion of self-confidence, which means that it's not actually real. So I met Robin Williams, and he's a nut job, or was a total crazy person, but he was talented, right? So he was able to go out and perform his talent, but outside of that, he was crazy. You couldn't have a conversation with him. He'd turn into different people in conversing with him. It was the most wild, 30 minutes I've ever had. We were at Billy Crystal's birthday party, and Robin Williams is a good friend, and he was there. And I left and I said, that guy's crazy. But to your point, I believe that there's also an illusion of confidence. Confident people don't walk around saying how confident they are, right? And often it's like that quote, right? The loudest in the room is often the weakest in the room.
Yeah.
But we have to understand, like, confidence actually is truly believing in yourself, regardless of what the outside world says of you, right? So what I find is when we talk about self-confidence and self-belief, I really believe that they're linked together, and I don't believe that you could really have one without the other. And what is a true illustration of self-belief and self-confidence is no longer desiring or looking for the applause of an outside party or parties to validate who you are internally. So when there's that gap that sits there, that's where the biggest issue is. And there's a lot of folks and even in business that they're doing things because they feel that they have to do it this way, because that's what will get them, either A, recognition, or B, people to believe in them, but they don't believe in it themselves. So anytime there's a gap that exists, again, going back to the gaps, I feel like that's where the biggest problems exist. So just again, there's people that are very confident in their talent because it's talent and it comes natural for them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have deep belief. And it also doesn't necessarily mean that they're confident as an individual. So confident in your talent and confident as a person are two different things. And this is where I'm going to bring it full circle for you. You could be confident in your talent and have low self-esteem and low confidence.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. That's a great way to say it. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
It's about asking the right questions. And with that in mind, with that kind of angle, that might help me ask the right question. So thank you.
Cool. You got it. Thank you.
Guys, this has been, we did go into extra innings, and I greatly appreciate that. This was definitely a Hall of Fame performance. I mean, the takeaways are ridiculous. And I know we're all going to have a lot of fun sharing those with our team. Dana, I obviously, brother, I cannot thank you enough.
Thanks, Scott.
Give
Thanks
my
for
best
having
to
me.
Lauren. Thank you for coming on and sharing, you know, your wisdom with this group. I know I speak for all of them in saying that this was absolutely tremendous. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I gave you guys my email and I gave you the LinkedIn. So say hi. I don't bite, but you know, if anything comes up, I'm happy to work with you. And I'm grateful to be a part of this council, and thank you all for taking your time, and Scott for putting this all together. There's always a lot that goes into these events. So thanks for doing that.
Coach, appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Everybody have a great day.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks.
Take care,
Bye,
crew. Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Awesome.